don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. But it looks like the price of food is going down. Shh, keep it low, because all the fear mongers about incessant inflation, they don't want to hear anything positive. They want to blame Biden, or they want to blame Trump, or they want to blame the guy from China, or they want to blame Putin, or they want to blame somebody. But they don't want to look and say, yeah, my life is pretty good. So shh, let's keep it between us. Anyway, so check this out. So my man Meb Faber has a huge fan of old Meb here. Just this Idea Farm. You should subscribe to old Meb. The Idea Farm, and he sends every week. He sends this, and this came across my feed from Meb. Hold on a second. Global food prices extended their slide to a 2-year low, adding to hopes that declines will eventually trickle through the grocery stores. But it's not showing up yet. Yeah, that's right. It takes time, man. It takes time for the prices to go up. It takes time for the prices to go back down to. It takes time. Dude, I got 4 kids. You recognize that. So when I talk about the silliness of saying this hyperinflation, it's so freaking dumb. Of Germany or Argentina in the United States. I'm like, when have we ever seen that? Never. We saw inflation after World War I. We saw inflation after World War II. We saw inflation from the 70s, and we saw inflation a couple years ago that we're still dealing with. But when have we ever seen hyperinflation in the U.S.? Never. And we'll never see hyperinflation. I'll share with you why here in just a second, too. Hold on. So let's keep going back to this. An index of food commodity costs fell 1.4% in June, marking the 14th drop in the last 15 months. Last month's decline was led by cheaper grains, vegetable oil, and sugar. Look at that. So here we are, back to where we were in 2021. The slump in the gauge from last year's record has taken time to feed through to consumers, with transport, labor, and energy costs remaining high. Energy cost. Interesting. Energy costs remaining high. Still, there are signs that grocery prices in nations like the UK are starting to ease, which could bring relief to stretched households. After a dry start to the summer, rains in the U.S. Midwest have improved prospects for this year's corn crop, and Brazil is starting a bumper harvest on its own. Of course, in Brazil, they're starting to take away guns. You filter a vote, if you know what I'm saying, Lula, and next thing you know, you're going after the guns. Plus, wheat crops are swelling in growers like the EU and Kazakhstan. Costs for indulgent treats could also begin to ease as sugar prices posted their first monthly decline in 5 months. Yet prices remain historically high, and unfavorable weather is threatening West African cocoa supplies. All right. Anyway, so I'm going to show you something here. Check this out. We go back to the lessons from the Great Depression that Charles Smith had written about in his of2minds.com blog. Very interesting, and I'll put a link in the show notes here, and you should watch it. Leave your partner satisfied, even if you're over 50? Wow, I can leave my partner satisfied if I'm over 50? What if she doesn't want to be satisfied? Oh, that was funny. All right, so let's take a look here. I'm going to show you something here. So Charles has his own little ancillary to the guy Roth, who had written the Lessons from the Great Depression. He had written a diary about it. So Charles says right here, fewer, I would emphasize too, fewer bad things can happen if you're debt free. Margin is debt backed by collateral. A mortgage is margin too. Debt backed the collateral of the house and land. All such debt has inherent risk. The value of the collateral may drop below the debt. That's loan to value. Loan to value, if it's over 100%, that means you're underwater. When the debt is called, repayment demanded, or cash must be paid to lower the debt to the current value of the collateral. The borrower either pays up in cash or the asset is forfeited. Yep, 100%. You don't want that to happen. So check this out. Debts become feather light in inflation, in hyperinflation, which is why banks won't let hyperinflation solve the problem of debt. Germany was under political pressure to pay its external debts to the victors of World War I, which was the ultimate source of the central bank deciding hyperinflation was a solution. But many expect asset deflation to occur, i.e. asset bubbles pop. Central banks will avoid generating hyperinflation because Destroying the nation's currency has virtually no upside and catastrophic downside. I 100% could not agree more. The central bank exists to protect the interests of the banks, and hyperinflation wipes out debts. But Josh, they also wipe out government debt. This is the problem. You don't know who owns government debt. We own our own government debt. A hell of a lot more than Japan and China and the EU does. Thus, we're not going to wipe out our own debt that we own to ourselves. And the central banks aren't going to do it because they exist to make sure the banks are profitable. I don't get how people don't get this. They're not going to monetize the debt and wipe out the debt. What would happen to the banks? But then we won't owe Japan anything. We don't owe Japan hardly anything relative to what we owe ourselves. Again, the central bank exists to protect the interests of the banks, and hyperinflation wipes out debts, loans, and banking. The risk of political disorder skyrockets, favoring the already wealthy, and capital is tolerated as long as the middle and working class feel they're prospering or that they hope to prosper. But when the middle and working classes are wiped out, favoring the wealthy, that triggers a huge blowback, chaotic overthrow of the status quo, 100%. All right, I could not agree more. Check this. So how do you deal with the insanity? The easiest way to minimize these risks is stop going to the casino, i.e. stop basically making speculative bets. Certainly to get out of debt, and if you have margin to buy stock. Another is to ask how dependent we are on the serial asset bubble economy. If the everything bubble pops and cannot be reinflated, what will likely be consequences for our household? 100%. Another is to always need less and waste less of everything: income, energy, food, etc. Get lean. And you should read my book right here, Relax and Retire, Debunking Inflation Fears. All right, you should read it because I talk about this. We talk about how the people in the Green Mountain by Eliot, I forgot his last name, he talks about how people gave away some of their sovereignty when they got rid of their basements where they can store food and whatnot. And then they went on to the scam of the small business market, where you got to basically, I don't have anything here, but you got to box stuff up in, ink, Amazon boxes, because you have to box things up to mail, and the postage, the ink to print the box, to print the labels, the box itself, the plastic shrink wrap. I'm looking at a CD right here, the shrink wrap, all that stuff. It's all expensive. And so if you can be lean, right here, need less, waste less of everything. Another, invest is what you personally control. Owning a productive plot of land with a livable micro greenhouse and no debt is a lower risk than owning a grand house with even a grander mortgage and property tax. So I was just talking to this lady today, just right now. She drives a 2020 Subaru and he drives a 2013. All right, both cars are in fine shape. She just bought the Subaru because her 10-year-old car. She goes, I'm going to go to retirement. I want to have a new, reliable car. And she bought it while she's still working. All right, so the issue is they don't spend very much money. They just want to live in a small house, be close to their grandkids, but still kind of out a ways for low property tax, no income tax, essentially. They're going to make around $80,000 a year in Social Security at their full retirement age. And that's a few years from now, but that's inflated at 2.4%. And they don't spend that much money. He wants to take a trip to Hawaii, and that's it. Dude, you don't need, they can do it easily. Yeah, there are prices that are increasing, other prices are decreasing, and right now the most prices are increasing. I feel it. But to sit there and say it's like this fundamental issue on our American economy, I don't get the naysayers. I don't understand it. Again, it must be, it's not just because I was raised poor, but it's just because I know other people raised poor, and they just like fundamentally disagree with me. Like literally, they have a visceral objection to my issues here. I don't understand it. Anyway, love your thoughts. I just don't get people. I can't retire in America. I can't, inflation. I don't get it. But all right, don't forget to subscribe to my locals channel. We go live every Wednesday and Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern time for $5 a month. You can join us. We had a good blast the other day. We did a science quiz. A space quiz, a lot of fun. We quizzed you on your knowledge of space and how fake a lot of that stuff is. It really is fun. We had a good time. So join us on the local. Send us in the doobie-doo. We'll see ya.